Hello and welcome to the big picture. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in India for a 2-day visit to attend the 15th India-Russia summit. The visit coming under the shadow of increasing tensions between Russia and the Western countries and India's own perceived proximity to US, Japan among others is being watched keenly. The India-Russia ties, which have withstood major upheavals globally for the last over 50 years, is however now seen to be suffering from some neglect. For India, it's a challenge to retain the proximity of ties with Russia even as it draws closer to the West, especially the US. Meanwhile, Russia is seen to be drawing closer to China and has struck a rare defense deal with Pakistan. In the context of all these developments, Putin's visit to India will be seen as one which both countries have to balance their relationship with each other in the context of their new proximities to other nations. Will the Russian President and the Indian Prime Minister be able to rebalance the relationship and find new ground? We will discuss all this today with Ajai Malhotra, former Indian Ambassador to Russia, Nandan Unnikrishnan, Vice President and Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Air Vice Marshal, retired Kapil, a defense analyst, and Vinod Sharma, political editor, Hindustan Times. And my colleague Akhilesh Suman will also be joining us. Welcome to all of you. Akhilesh, actually I'll come to you first. Now, what is it that is on cards during this summit, and what is it that India is expecting to, have, the kind of outcome which India is expecting?
Actually, Girish, see, this is really surprising that Mr. Putin is coming just for 24 hours in India, and he is not giving any opportunity to our Prime Minister to host him well the way he has hosted Xi Jinping. So you can understand there is cheek in the mouth from Russian side that they want to see that how far India can go. The way India has colluded in the past with Western countries and America, Russia is really skeptical what they are going to get. We were trying to converse with the External Affairs Ministry officials, and they are telling that something good is going to come, something great is going to come. And especially in the field of oil and gas, Russians are very interested that India should invest in Russian Arctic, where there is a lot of opportunity for gas extraction. And also they want that India should invite the nuclear plants that had been jeopardized because of the nuclear liability law. But what we have been told that Russia is not so much concerned about nuclear liability law because Russia has been already supporting us. Russia has already been making nuclear plants in India. So I think Russia is the best bargain at this point of time before Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to meet US President Barack Obama in the next month.
Okay. Okay, Akhilesh. Thanks for giving that perspective. Thanks for joining us. Air Marshal Kak, would you see it in that the way my Akhilesh looks at it?
No, I think you put the very critical and sensitive geopolitical environment that exists globally in a very good perspective. I don't quite agree with your correspondent that India colluded with anybody.
Okay.
I don't think India ever colludes with anybody against somebody. We are looking at a world order in which nations are pursuing their national interests on issue-based function-specific considerations and pursuing their policies. And I think in that context, India-Russia policy goes back, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi put it so well, every child in India would nominate Russia as the closest friend. I was in 71 war. I mean, here was one event in global history which was earth-shaking, that a country was being created militarily, and for that you needed support of one great power. And I think the Soviet Union of that time gave it all in terms of being even challenged to take part in a war to deter the Chinese, who were that time, and now here your reporter is right, colluding with the Americans to see how India could be contained.
No, that was a different time. This is a different time. We are living in different times. I'm sure you will accept that the kind of relationship which Russia and India had in those days is not exactly the same.
Of course, this is not Nehruvian socialism. Right. But I think both have come to terms with the fact that India is emerging as a great power and Russia is on the decline. That needs to be accepted. Now, how do we put our past energies in diplomacy and historical ties in a perspective to see that both look at a strategic future by which India, firstly, engages Russia to increase its strategic space vis-a-vis the Americans and the Chinese.
Okay.
That Russians also would like India to be close to it so that it can tell the world that it has friends like Russia and China. So I think this is the global kind of tectonic plate shifting in which both will see benefits of a relationship which needs to be taken qualitatively to a higher level and perhaps a vision document for a 10-year perspective.
Okay. Ambassador Malhotra, the question is, why is it that some people feel that the relationship between India and Russia, seems to be neglected in the recent past? Why is that feeling there?
I don't think that would be an accurate feeling. You see, unlike our relations with other countries, we have an annual summit with Russia, and perhaps that is why it's not so well appreciated. Since the year 2000, we have met with the Russian president every year, and that is for substantive talks. There is no other country with whom we meet on a regular basis for such an annual summit.
Right.
So that needs to be borne in mind.
Okay. Nandan, the question is that whatever whatever the MEA may say, or the fact, would you admit that there is some kind of a strain in the relationship? And as Akhilesh was talking about, just coming here only for 24 hours, not the kind of visit which we witnessed with other, say like the Chinese president and what Obama, the US president, is going to come. Do you see that as some kind of a indication by Russia that they are a little skeptical about India?
No, in fact, if we have to go into that kind of comparative analysis, I would say we've improved, because last time he came for less than 24 hours. So, I mean, that is not, I think, the criteria by which this judgment about the depth and strength of a relationship should be made. The second is, I think Ambassador Malhotra has put it very succinctly, there is no other country with whom we meet on a yearly basis. And the meeting on a yearly basis is not just a reiteration of what has happened in the past, but also to see and address if there are any knotty issues that need to be resolved at the highest level. So this is a working meeting. It is not a meeting at which you're looking at making any major breakthroughs. But yes, the geopolitical context in which it has taken place or is going to take place is slightly different. Russia is under pressure from the West, is under sanctions, and therefore they may be making a greater effort to reach out to show to the world that they are not isolated, and may not be so much to the world, but even to an internal audience in Russia. President Putin is probably trying to show that he's not isolated, that Russia has many warm friends. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, the previous National Security Advisor went on record suggesting that Russia has legitimate interests in Ukraine, and whatever transpired there was not initiated by the Russians. So therefore, I personally believe that this relationship is on a fair footing, fair base. There are many lacunae that have to be addressed, primarily in the economic relationship, and I think during this visit some attempts will be made.
Vinod, the question is that these tensions between the West and Russia, India seems to be, as of now, India is in a delicate position, but it seems to have played its cards pretty carefully. You expect this to continue? How do you see Russia looking at India in this context?
Well, India needs to play its cards carefully, and insofar as the tenure of the time frame, the window of the visit, I don't think that's a consideration at all, because our Prime Minister has gone there. I was with him, Dr. Manmohan Singh, just for a day. He was there only for a day, and he came back in a day. These are annual summits. which is that the heads of state and government of the both sides, I mean, depending on, the president from their side and our prime minister, then meet and take stock of the relationship. And there is a strategic relationship between Russia and India since time immemorial, so to speak. But in recent months, in the new government, the kind of strong pitch it is making to reach out to the West, and if you juxtaposition that with the declining relationship between the Russian Federation and the Western powers, there was a time when they were quite at peace with each other.
Absolutely.
Soviet Federation, Russian Federation, and the Western powers. But now there's a dispute, and which is Ukraine. And as Nandan pointed out, that there are economic sanctions against the Soviet Union. I see that this opportunity should be availed by the Narendra Modi government more to clarify to Putin that India places the relationship with the Russian Federation at the same pedestal or almost similar pedestal as it used to in the past, and that there might be contradictions in the positions of the United States and other Western powers and Russia on certain disputes. But we are keen to balance our relationship, and it is no one relationship is at the cost of the other.
Exactly.
In fact, in a speech at the Hindustan Times Summit, Ajai made this point. He said that we are trying to create a balance while building relations with countries which may not be on the best of terms with each other. And this is, I think, in India's best interest. He must also take up the defense pact, which, you see, the Russian defense minister went to Pakistan for the first time after 1969. And Putin is on record that they are going to supply armaments to Pakistan in order to fight terror, Now, I do not know what it means and how it translates on the ground, but any induction of weapon systems into Pakistan by the Russian Federation could be a cause of concern for us, given the kind of terror threats we faced from Pakistan.
Right.
Similarly, China has promised to invest in Pakistan up to 2020 over $45 billion US.
Right.
Now, China and Russia have gotten closer lately in order to counterbalance what's happening against them in the West and and with the US. So I think that this whole relationship today has to be reworked and redefined in keeping with the changed positions of various countries.
Okay, Ambassador Malhotra, would you agree to that? That we need to rebalance the relationship and the proximity of Russia with China and its defense deal with Pakistan. Aren't these causes for concern?
No, I couldn't hear you very clearly last time, but this time I had. So let me make a few comments if you don't mind. First of all, I think it should be clear that our ties with Russia are fundamental and key to our foreign policy. If you look at the new government, again, our approach to foreign affairs is promoting India first. And if you look at how our relations with USA are changing, I think it should be clear that our growing engagement with USA, and in fact with any other country, with several other countries where it is improving, it is not at the cost of our traditional and our deep-rooted friendship with Russia. You must appreciate that Russia is amongst our #1 partners in many, many sectors.
Right.
In defense, in atomic energy, in space, in science and technology, etc. And none of this is going to change. In fact, in the agreements that will come up, there will be a progression of the work that we've been doing as a continuity. It isn't that there'll be some rebalancing that will be going on. You will find that we will be bringing out a strategic vision document. There'll be a strategic vision document on nuclear energy. There'll be one on defense cooperation. And there'll be quite a few very interesting economic cooperation documents.
Okay.
So these all are not the signs of a declining relationship, but of a relationship that will continue to prosper.
No, but
and to the last point you made,
yes,
it is certainly not. It is certainly not in India's interest to kind of cold shoulder or be less than friendly towards Russia. In fact, this would work against our own interests. It would doubly strengthen the hands of China and would also be something that the Pakistanis would view with rather favorably. So this is hardly the approach that we would follow. It is one of continuity in foreign affairs. And I see this as being another great visit where we would welcome President Putin and
Malhotra,
try and move forward in as many areas as we can.
Mr. Malhotra, the question is that, all this is fine, but the question is that the fact that Russia is getting closer to China and its defense deal with Pakistan, my specific question is, aren't these causes for concern? Why do you think they are happening? Or should India just ignore what is happening on the ground there?
No, we should not ignore. Certainly, I think one of the end results of the sanctions imposed by the West is to push Russia a little closer towards China.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. If you look at energy, if you look at the deal signed there, if you look at also the new prospects of cooperation that they're going to do in transportation, etc., certainly there is a closer relationship. But this does not impinge on the India-Russia relationship in a large manner unless it continues to spiral downwards. And therefore, it is in our interest to see that these sanctions against Russia do not continue for a long time.
Okay.
As regards Pakistan,
yes,
we are talking here about Mi helicopters.
Right.
Let me point out that, our first purchases from Russia were Mi helicopters themselves. In 1958, we bought Mi-4 helicopters. At the moment, over 80 air forces of the world have Mi helicopters. Russia has in the past supplied Mi helicopters to Pakistan in the 1980s, 1990s, and the last decade too. But these have been Mi-8s, and if you would have seen the press reports on the relief that was there in Pakistan, occupied Kashmir, during the earthquake and the floods they had in 2000. So, Mr. Malhotra, they were using Mi helicopters.
So, no, Mr. Malhotra, that's why, are you saying that, this is something which we should not be seriously bothered about?
No, we should be bothered about it. The difference I wanted to make, if you'll let me continue,
yes,
is at least the media reports talk of the Mi-35, which is an upgraded version of the Mi-24. Now, this is a night attack helicopter, and we don't know the numbers. We don't know if a deal is being signed or when it will be signed. So I'm only going by media reports. But still, we must point out to President Putin that the people of India will not appreciate it. And it is a somewhat different thing to talk of attack helicopters, even though it can be explained that this will be used for fighting illegal narcotic drug dealers or for fighting terrorism. Because these are attack helicopters which can be used in either direction.
Okay.
And if I may make one last point.
Yes.
Whereas our growing engagement with the USA does not affect Russia's security, Russia's provision of such attack helicopters to Pakistan would impinge on our security, depending on the numbers involved.
Okay.
But again, let us not forget that the Pakistanis do have some Mi-17 helicopters which they got from the Americans.
Okay.
And that these are going to be supplied in the Afghanistan context too.
Okay.
So it all depends on what kind of helicopters. And I think we should certainly raise this with President Putin, and I'm absolutely certain that our Prime Minister would do so, draw attention to this concern.
Okay. Marshal Kak, the defense deals which are happening, obviously from what Ambassador Malhotra is saying, that it is a cause for concern. We need to take it seriously. We have to be talking to the Russians and saying that we really don't appreciate this. So it means that Russians are actually moving closer to Pakistan and China, and it can be a problem for us.
No, I mean, you have to look at it in geopolitical terms. What is the greatest threat to Indian security now and in the decades ahead? It is the congruence of the China-Pakistan axis individually targeting India and collectively in collusion as well. And I think here the worrisome part is, one, that Russia is supplying equipment over the years, including Sukhoi 30s, to China. It's not of great concern to us. But when those supplies come towards Pakistan in due course, that's a cause of grave concern. As to the Mi-17 helicopters, these have been with Pakistan for years and we haven't said a thing. But there is talk in the media, as Ambassador rightly said, of Mi-35. Then when you start to walk this talk, the Mi-35 can then become combat platforms. If Russia becomes weaker and weaker, gets more and more isolated and puts more and more eggs of its basket in China, then we have a bigger concern. That is the issue. And I have no doubt that this will be an issue raised with President Putin, because complaint both by the ambassador in India, which have been somewhat inelegant for an ambassador to talk about a buy we have made or planning to buy from France as a lady dragonfly who can be swatted by. I mean, that's not an expression for an ambassador to use. Of course, there are complaints. The Americans complained to us, why did we go to France for our big deal, the Rafale? The Russians are complaining. But I think this is a choice a sovereign nation exercises because it has concerns for its defense and whether it's getting a platform, fighter platform, which will fly in the Indian skies for the next half a century. Okay. I think that is a good buy. Absolutely. But a bigger issue in defense, I think we need to keep in mind this business of diversifying sources of supply is a strategic compulsion for India. Mr. Modi is going to continue on that line, but may I at the end suggest that even after India has diversified all its sources of weapons and equipment, the Russian equipment, especially in terms of combat platforms for the Indian Air Force, for example, will constitute nearly 60% of the overall strength of the Air Force even after 30 years from today. Okay. So where are we talking about a deceleration in that relationship?
Okay. Nandan, well, the defense problems aside, the fact of the matter is India is really that way facing a challenge to ensure that Russia doesn't get isolated. How do we do it? Are we on the right track as far as that is concerned? Is this an issue which India can raise with, say, the Western nations, especially US? And are we doing it? And how do we plan to go about doing it?
Well, you know, one is that I don't visualize India being an interlocutor between the West and Russia. Exactly. There are enough back channels between the West and Russia which are reliable and which are capable of doing the job. But in terms of isolation, India has a natural, long-standing relationship with Russia. I think,
but that seems to be getting affected now. If going by what all you panelists have said so far,
if any effort, every effort is made by India to deepen and strengthen that relationship, that in itself will be a contribution towards reducing any efforts to isolate Russia from the rest of the world. The second thing is that, you know, we are talking hypothetically about a possibility of Russia falling into a strategic embrace with China. Now, if that does happen, for whatever reason...
It's just a hypothetical situation?
No, I think there is a danger. Undoubtedly, there is a danger. But that danger is not something that will happen tomorrow or day after. But we may be moving towards it. And we have time to prepare. And I think in our country, we are well aware that the Russians and the Chinese also have to overcome many obstacles between each other before they can actually build a relationship which is anywhere near the relationship that we have with the Russians at this point of time. So I think I would tend to agree with both the Air Marshal and Mr. Malhotra that when we are talking about growing relationship of Russia with either China or Pakistan, we must voice it. Undoubtedly, we must raise it and we must put our concerns on the table. But we also must understand that this is not something that is going to happen tomorrow.
Vinod, the Indian government's position on these issues? Is there a clarity in the Indian government's position?
Well, I'm afraid, you see, I think it's still in the process of evolving. You see, what we have seen in recent months, ever since there has been a change of government in Delhi, that we have reached out and in pursuit of our own interests very firmly to Vietnam. Our Prime Minister went to Japan and made a statement which wasn't exactly palatable to China. And then we are pitching for a very strong relationship with the Americans, and we have a very strong, growing strategic partnership, especially in terms of our internal security with the Israelis. Now, if an impression goes around, and I'm sorry, I mean, I may be spared by other panelists if I'm being an alarmist without reason, that if India is going to be some kind of a latter-day South Korea, then there's bound to be a North Korea in our neighborhood. Let's not forget about that. And this is something which is not going to happen overnight. And we have time to repair the relationship. We have time to reassure our old allies that, look, our new relationships, our growing vigorous interaction with other countries is towards creating a market in this region which shall be to the benefit of everyone, including China, including the Russian Federation, and if our relationship improves with Pakistan, even Pakistan. And I think that if we were to present ourselves as a reliable nuclear power with a market with a potential to benefit everybody around us, that would be the best line to take.
Absolutely. Yes, Nandan, I'll come to you, sir.
Add one thing. You know, the
very quickly,
the compelling imperative in India today is development. For that, we require peace on our borders and in our environment. If Russia is able to write itself in to our development story, there is no stopping this relationship. Right. But that effort has to be made, and they have to be part of our development story.
As far as the economic development story is concerned, we are still lagging behind as far as with Russia.
In fact, the economic development of that relationship is the key to any future growth of that relationship. But I want to clarify the point that's been made about India becoming a kind of a South Korea. It's most unlikely, because I think India has a very clear perspective on how it will manage its strategic relations in a world which is anarchic, which is non-ideological, and each country is pursuing its national interests in the matter it deems most appropriate. That is not going to happen.
Ambassador Malhotra, very quick last words to you. You know, why is it that India's relationship with Russia as far as economic matters are concerned have been lagging behind, and do you expect this to have some better momentum in the recent future?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that it's an important point to make that India needs the breathing space to develop and to strengthen itself, because we have to always remember that our strategic competitor in all of this is China. And that was the compulsion which led us to even do our nuclear tests. Now, coming to your question.
Yes.
Certainly neither Russia nor India have ever been great trading countries.
Right.
At no stage in our relationship have we had a large trading volume. The best we did was in 2012, when for the first time we went over 10 billion and did 11-point-some billion dollars.
Okay.
But that is not to say that we don't have a very extensive relationship with Russia. And here let me point out one fact. When we refer to the 5th generation fighter aircraft arrangement or the multi-role transport aircraft arrangement, for example, the 5th generation fighter aircraft will be costing something like $30 to $35 billion over time. And as one of the speakers said very correctly, our defense relationship with Russia is nowhere near kind of, tuning down.
Okay.
In fact,
sir, we are
it will continue to prosper in the years ahead.
Okay, Mr. Malhotra, we are running out of time. But I think you've given the perspective. The fact of the matter is that there is a need, from today's discussion at least, it is very evident that there is a need to rebalance the relationship between India and Russia. Needs to rebalance the relationship, probably find new grounds also. Hopefully we'll see how the visit of Putin will develop over the next 24 hours and what will be the outcome. Thanks to all my guests, Ambassador Malhotra, Kapil, Nandan, Unnikrishnan, and Vinod Sharma. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in Big Picture same time tomorrow.